So everybody's talking about AI accountability, right? It's the big buzzword. But what if? What if the whole conversation is basically a sham? Well, we're going to dive into this really powerful paper by Chandranath. And it argues that this whole quest for responsible AI isn't just failing, it's actually a dangerous fantasy, one that could be leading us down a really, really perilous path.
You know, the story you usually hear is super optimistic. They say, hey, we're right on the brink of a breakthrough. We're going to find that perfect balance between mind-blowing AI innovation and, rock-solid responsibility. And look, it's the future we all want to believe in, for sure.
But this is where the paper we're breaking down today just drops a bombshell. It asks a pretty tough question. What if all these fancy high-level talks in these ethical panels, what if they're just for show? What if it's all just governance theater, a performance we put on for ourselves, while the real, gritty problems are just getting swept under the rug?
And that performance, that whole show, is built on something the paper calls the accountability myth. And it's this really dangerous idea that we can just sit around and talk about accountability in the abstract without ever getting our hands dirty with the messy, technical, and strategic reality of what AI actually is.
Yeah, and this slide, it absolutely nails the definition of governance theater. See, it's not just that it's empty talk. The paper argues it's talk that is specifically designed to avoid the two giant elephants in the room. First, the hard technical limits of AI, and second, the cold, hard geopolitical reality that our adversaries, well, they're not going to play by our nice ethical rules.
Okay, so let's tackle that first elephant, shall we? The technology itself. This is what the paper calls the black box problem. And folks, this is where the entire idea of AI accountability just slams face first into a brick wall made of code and mathematics.
This slide really lays it all out. It's a fundamental mismatch. Think about it. Our whole legal system is built on a super clear chain of cause and effect. Actor A did action B, causing outcome C. Simple, right? But modern AI, it doesn't work like that at all. It's not following some logical, step-by-step program. It's making a highly educated statistical guess about what word or what pixel should come next based on patterns it found in just a mind-boggling amount of data.
And this quote from the paper, it is just perfect. Technically, we cannot subpoena a probability distribution. I mean, think about that. You can't put an AI on the witness stand and ask it why it did what it did, because its reasoning is just a massive mathematical calculation across billions of parameters. There's no internal monologue to read out. There's no aha moment to uncover.
So this all leads to a huge, and I mean unavoidable trade-off. We can build an AI that's incredibly powerful and effective, or we can build an AI that's simple enough for us to actually understand what it's doing. But right now, today, we can't have both. The most capable models are, almost by definition, the least understandable.
And the consequence of that trade-off? It's staggering when you think about it. If our laws demand that every single AI has to be fully explainable, well, we might be legally forcing ourselves to use inferior, less capable systems. We'd basically be putting an artificial cap on the intelligence of our own systems.
Okay, so if the AI itself is technically kind of unblameable, then who takes the fall when things inevitably go wrong, right? Well, that question brings us to the paper's second big argument, a legal maneuver that it calls the liability shell game.
So here's how the paper says this game is played. Step 1, a big lab develops the core AI model. Step 2, they use their end-user license agreement, that wall of fine print nobody ever reads, to shift all the legal risk away from themselves. And where does that risk go? Step 3, it lands squarely on the shoulders of the person or company who's actually using the AI. Think about a hospital using an AI for diagnosis, or a school using one for grading. They're the ones left holding the bag. And the paper has this really powerful analogy for this whole situation. It's the gun manufacturer defense. The AI labs are basically saying, hey, we just built the tool. We're not responsible for how it's used or what it spits out. They provide the weapon, but they accept zero, and I mean zero liability for how it's fired.
And this, the paper argues, is why all the talk about ethical guidelines and responsible AI is essentially toothless. Sure, it sounds good in a press release, but it does absolutely nothing to change the legal sleight of hand that lets the developers just pass the buck down the line.
Okay, this brings us to the third part of the argument, and honestly, it's the most chilling one, the strategic disadvantage. What does this whole accountability fantasy mean when it comes to things like national security and the future of warfare?
So first, a real quick definition you need to know, the OODA loop. In military strategy, it's everything. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. It's the decision-making cycle. And the rule is simple. The faster your loop, the more likely you are to win. And the whole promise of AI in this context? To make that loop happen at terrifying machine speeds.
But here's the giant problem the paper points out. If we mandate that our military AI has to be explainable, or that there must always be a human in the loop, well, we are deliberately adding friction. We are slowing our own OODA loop down. Meanwhile, an adversary who places 0 of those constraints on their AI, they're going to have a massive and potentially decisive speed advantage over us.
The paper's conclusion on this point is, well, it's stark. And frankly, it's pretty terrifying. It calls this unilateral disarmament via regulation. Think about that. By tying our own hands with rules that our adversaries will just laugh at and ignore, we are actively regulating ourselves into a position of incredible strategic weakness.
Okay, so if the current path is this dangerous fantasy, what's the alternative? What do we do? Well, the paper wraps up by outlining what a more realistic, more grounded approach to AI governance might actually look like.
It really boils down to facing 3 core realities. First, on the technical side, we just have to accept that AI is probabilistic, not logical. It's about math, not reason. Second, legally, all this talk about accountability is completely meaningless until the developers themselves are actually held liable. And third, strategically, we simply cannot afford to regulate ourselves into obsolescence in the middle of a global algorithmic arms race. And at the end of the day, the paper's core argument is this. The people making the rules need to be the ones who actually deeply understand the technology. This can't just be a conversation dominated by lawyers and ethicists talking in the abstract. It has to be led by the computer scientists and the military strategists. You know, the people who are actually in the field, not just debating it in a courtroom. Which leaves us with one final, really provocative question that kind of cuts right to the heart of this entire debate. As we hurtle into this new age of AI, who should be writing the rules? Who gets the final say in shaping our future? The courtroom with its legal frameworks, or the code with its technical realities?